Hello, all. This is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I really wanted to get into talking to you about data cleaning methods for text data. This is part of my Nerd Out Wednesdays series where I put things out for anybody that's interested in science or doing any sort of social science and stuff. So it's just tips and tricks that I've learned over the years in terms of helping my own self. I analyze a tremendous amount of data. I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I do analyze a lot of data. In fact, that's where the whole reciprocity project came from, was trying to figure out a way to analyze some of this data. Anyways, you can check out what it is about, and you can watch some of the older videos. But so what are some tips and tricks and methods to actually clean text data? What are some of the things that I learned? Well, I'm not going to give you any sort of specific codes or anything like that of going through the actual specific. So I use Stata myself, or Stata. Some of you might use that. Other people might use Python, for example. Some people might use Excel to clean the data. And I've used a number of different ones that are like that. Excel's pretty good. I like Stata just because I've used it for a long time now, but there's other things that you can use. But basically what you're trying to do with data cleaning methods is you're trying to actually make the data usable in some sort of way, right? So often you will get, if it's publicly available data, you will get data that is really messy. People input all sorts of crazy stuff in publicly available data. And then you have to sort of sort through and make sense exactly what that is. So whether you are, so in my field, we would sort of sort and look at firm names, for example, and try to match firm names to something else. So company names to something else. Well, people input all sorts of crazy things for the company names. They might also include like ABC Inc. They might include, ABC Corporation, all those kind of things. You have to sort of figure out how to actually clean this data so it's usable and you can match it to other things. Or you can actually just make sense of it, right? Because a lot of times, particularly if it's like user-generated data where people input a bunch of stuff and they have to, input as much as they want and they have comments and stuff like that. Often, like at face value, is very much not usable. But you have to, if you clean it, if you put some filters through it, it sometimes is much more easier to use, and then it's much more simpler. And this is a problem that all of us have to deal with at analyzing any sort of data like that. So what are some of the steps for data cleaning, or some data cleansing steps that I use? So first thing that you should be doing all the time whenever you are analyzing data is just save your data and make a copy. It's really important to do that. You don't know how many times I've lost my data and I had to start from scratch. Pain in the butt. But I always try to work with just a copy moving forward. So then what you want to do after that, once you save your data, you want to go through and actually convert your data to, so if it's text data, and I'm just focusing on text data right now, let's convert your data to either all caps or, remove capitalization. You can use a function, whatever you're using, and you just make it all one standardized capitalization. That makes sure, because sometimes people will use all caps one time, some people don't use all caps. And you're just trying to actually get the actual information that's in there. Then what I do, and it's different for everybody else, but this is what I do, is I will actually remove, so it depends on the step of what I'm going to do. So, and you can flip these around. So I actually remove the data, or remove the spaces in the data. So I'll trim either the front and the back, and then trim the spaces within the data as well. So within the actual text. And then you can use some sort of for loop in it. And maybe I would use that before, I don't know. But search for, what I look for is special characters, is use some sort of for loop or something like that to look for special characters in the text data. And then I would have sort of a list of typical text characters. One thing I did learn is that Mac has its own text characters, so you got to look for those sometimes, and because it'll screw things up. Or you can look for the ones that are already in there, and you can go through and analyze the data that way. So oftentimes it's just looking, as well as sort of going through and sort of making sense of what special characters people are going to use for that specific data. And so it's going to be different for the specific data that you're looking at compared to what somebody else is doing. Then after that, and this might be, again, this might be before you remove the spaces. It just depends on what kind of data you're looking at. I will look for, and I'll create some sort of for loop to remove sort of common words. But be careful that the words are long enough that they can actually be a consistent pattern, right? So if it's a 2-letter word, you're probably going to remove actual real legitimate data. But if it's a 6-letter word that's really common, that doesn't really add any sort of value, then you're pretty confident that you can remove that out of the data and you're not going to sort of mess things up or mess any sort of pattern. So what do I mean by a common word that doesn't add value? Might be, so I said ABC Corporation before, so you can take out corporation, right? It doesn't really add any sort of value because sometimes people put ABC Corporation, sometimes people put ABC or ABC Incorporated, right? And those things they're fundamentally the same thing, but you want to sort of be able to remove the corporation or incorporated and make sense of it, right? So that's the key thing. And then you could use also, whatever function you'd use specifically for your code, you might use like a sub and string kind of function or basically like a find and replace kind of function. You just for loop through and find those. I've used and I've tried to look for things that are sort of prepackaged and stuff like that do that. I think that and I can't remember the exact program, but there was one that was made by Google a few years ago to do all this kind of stuff. And I've used it. It works okay. And it's still doing the basic things that I'm suggesting at this moment. It doesn't really, it's really problematic, right? Text data is really messy and it's really difficult to go through and make sense of it. The last thing is you might want to sort of look for, like if you're matching data, for example, you might create another column or another sort of set of records, and that you're looking for string sequences of some sort, and then you can sort of match and create a record for those string sequences that are common or that are going to appear, right? So if you're looking for somebody actually saying a sequence of words in a row, right? Like, I really like David Maslach. I really like these videos that he puts out. So then you'd search for that string sequence and you look for a number of times that somebody actually wrote that down or something like that. So I wanted to actually point out, so the last thing I wanted to point out, and this is sort of my 6th point that I wanted to point out, is that when you're using text data, or user-generated data or anything like that, at this moment, I would stay away from any sort of like actual programming or actual machine kind of stuff at this moment. It still doesn't work that good. So I was using fuzzy logic a few years ago, and it didn't really work that good. Sort of like a fuzzy logic kind of matching algorithm, which would look for kind of closely related words and terms and stuff like that, but it doesn't really do that good of a job. I just didn't have very good experience with it. Now with the whole reciprocity project, hopefully I can change that and start incorporating some stuff in there if anybody wants any of that kind of stuff. But the basic story is you really just need some human eyes to look at data and sort through the data to make sense of it, right? It's really difficult to actually get to the point where you actually have clean data, particularly user-generated data, and you just need human eyes to look at it to make sense of what's going on. So that's it. That's all I wanted to talk about today. Hopefully you like this video about data cleansing methods for text data. I know that there's probably other things that I'm missing. You can put those in the show notes. Maybe I'm giving you the wrong advice, but this is more on the practical side of what I've learned over the years. Maybe there's a computer scientist out there that probably has some better information than I have, but I just recently watched somebody that was at another professor that's a computer scientist at a very good university sort of give kind of the same sort of tips. So maybe, but maybe there's somebody else that has better ideas than I do. So that's it. That's all I want to talk about. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.